This morning, we are highlighting stories from people who have fought against overwhelming odds in Janice Dean's new book, I Am the Storm.
So this book centers around whistleblowers, underdogs, and ordinary people who chose to fight rather than take the path of least resistance. So meteorologist and New York Times best-selling author Janice Dean joining us live this morning to share some of those stories. And thanks so much for joining us. Good to have you.
Thank you, Bill and Maria. Thank you for having me today.
You bet. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, listen, we all went through a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. We're still into it in a lot of cases, and I had something tragic happen to my family. My husband lost both of his parents, who were living in separate elder care facilities at the time, and COVID crashed into our lives. We had no idea that the government was putting COVID-positive patients into their elder care facilities, and we had over 15,000 deaths. So I felt it was my responsibility to find out why that was happening, because if there was one thing we knew well, is that the virus was going to be very susceptible to the elderly. So listen, I am the sunny weather forecaster. I've been here almost 20 years. This was not a position that I wanted to be in, but I think it was important on behalf of my family and thousands of other families across the country to find out why our government was doing that. So that was sort of the springboard to the book. The book is not all about me, though. I feature over a dozen stories of people, real-life David and Goliath stories of people who go up against something bigger than themselves and come out on the other side and want to help others.
So tell us how it is that you selected the people to feature, because there's always people out there doing great work.
That's a good question. You know, I found a lot of COVID-related stories. I think as we were kind of locked up and seeing what was happening outside of us, we saw people rising up, like families that wanted their kids to get back to school sooner than, you know, a year or two. I talked to a nurse from Georgia who came to New York at the very beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know how deadly this virus was going to be, and she was in the hospital trying to give relief for some of the nurses. And the money that she made here in New York, and she saw such tragedy, she decided to do good in her hometown of Georgia to set up a youth center. So those are the types of stories. I also talk about my friend Ray Pfeiffer, who died of 9/11 related cancer, but before he died, he wanted to make sure that his fellow first responders had health care for the rest of their lives. So those are the types of David and Goliath stories that everyday people go through, and they either decide to do nothing or rise to the challenge.
Yeah, powerful stuff. So what do you want readers to take away from these stories?
That we all go through our storms in life, right? It comes from the expression, fate whispers to the warrior and says, you're not strong enough to withstand the storm. And the warrior says, but I am the storm. You know, standing up for something that you believe in, even if you're the only one. If truth is on your side, then you're always going to have people who will eventually help you get your message across.
Janice Dean, a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
I Am the Storm, out right now. It's available wherever books are sold. And Janice Dean joining us live this morning. Okay, 7:18.